broader cultural context of pathological demand avoidance, in brackets PDA, Profile of Autism by Richard Woods at London South Bank University, PhD student. So I do have some conflicts of interest. I'm not going to linger on them too long because this information is publicly available and it is in the draft notes for this presentation, which will be in the description. So yeah, a bit about my perspective. I am diagnosed as autistic in 2012. I do meet Elizabeth Neeson's PDA behavioural profile, but I am not emotionally attached to it. I'm presently no longer basing my identity on these, basically psychiatric categories as much as I can do. I am equally respecting divergent views and evidence on PDA to critically synthesise appropriate interpretations on it, and my PhD is investigating PDA as part of the critical autism slash disability studies group at London South Bank University. This is my interpretation of PDA and its literature. Others may disagree. I may sometimes use medical model based language, but this is because I'm just reflecting the source material, not that I necessarily agree with it. And this is, so I intrinsically recognise that such categories are intrinsically social constructs. So moving forward, introduction. This video is part of a broader series that I am doing over the late 2023 and early 2004, explaining my views on PDA. But this one will be the second video in a smaller series of a trilogy of videos, which are expanding the first video in the series, explaining why I think PDA seems to be another autism scandal waiting to happen. So yeah, in order to get the most out of this video, you need to watch the first video in the series. I do need to give some trigger warning. This video will be discussing filicide and suicide on slides 4, 25 and 27. There are some images in this talk. I am not... Sorry, there is some quotes in this video. I'm not going to read them out. I'm just going to briefly discuss them to kind of make the points I wish to make. For the images that I've used towards the end of the talk, I have links to them can be found in the video description because I haven't referenced them. So yeah, the actual topics in this video is going to be the present situation in autism studies, the PDA continua diagram that I use, vulnerable groups, seemingly predictable consequences, and PDA profile of autism community in practice. I should probably switch them over, but yeah. And then obviously ending with my kind of concluding reflective questions. So the broader situation within autism studies, by that I mean like autism theory, research and practice, is that autistic persons are systemically poorly treated by society. In the context of the UK, we know that there's decreasing quality of services, and this is seems to be partly due to austerity. There's specific kind of indicators like worst case scenarios. So, for example, for suicides of autistic people, that we know that within England it seems that it's been close to 11% of autistic persons. Sorry, at least 11% of suicides in England are due to autistic persons, and that's at least because of there are indicators that more of that kind of sample are autistic. There's also examples of filicide, which is caregivers murdering children. So we know in there are examples of caregivers killing autistic children and young persons, and this tends to be because of the atrocious discourse around autism. A lot of the time is that autism is presented as this really horrible thing where it basically robs people of the opportunities to have a normal life, and so often, in some cases, caregivers can be so distressed by what they read around autism and learn about autism that they do not see a future for themselves or their child, so they really intensely dislike the autism, and they will often kill in such a situation, they will often kill their child to cure their autism, but well, they're attempting to cure their autism, but the process to kill the child. So yeah, we know that much or most autism research is poor quality, and we know that often poor quality research is often associated with poor quality ethics. Particular examples at the moment within autism studies is there is a theory to research practice gap, and there's a general lack of good quality theories, such as often social theories to explain kind of social communication issues in autism. And I did say social communication issues in autism in quotation marks. Um, Often are examples of some poor qualities theories. So that's not including double empathy problem, by the way. Okay, so just moving on. So pathologizing theories are often poor quality with weak evidence, and associated interventions often lack efficacy. And we know that there's general lack of inclusive research, although some people are striving to improve autism research practice standards. So yes, moving on to PDA. PDA itself is recognised to be controversial, and multiple independent reputable parties have recently concluded there is little to no good quality evidence suggests what PDA is or what features are associated with PDA, and that divergent opinion has been equally treated in these reviews. So that's the Royal College of Psychiatry, that's the British Psychological Society, that's a systematic review, that's a Dutch systematic review, I think, and that's NICE, which I've forgotten its full name, which is something like the National Institute for Clinical and Health Excellence or something in the United Kingdom. So, and also PDA has been robustly challenged for at least 2 decades at this point, going back to 2002. So this is a diagram which I often use to describe PDA. So left hand side you have PDA Profile of Autism. On the right hand side you would have kind of classical more straightforward autism. And these are series of continua. So the red arrows indicate kind of a feature is more problematic, more impairing, and green is that it's less of an issue or not an issue at all. Um, you'll know that PDA tends to have more problematic aspects of these continua than autism does. Um, so yeah, I would point out there's an alternative way of looking at this diagram is that the left hand side is just representing features of co-occurring issues for autism, such as ADHD, anxiety, conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, and trauma features, and the other side is just mainly autism. I should note, please do not verify this diagram, it has some problematic issues. But some of the features include stuff like anxiety, avoidance of ordinary demands like fantasy and role playing, impulsivity, a kind of need for control or drive or autonomy, like rapid mood changes, like socially strategic to manipulative avoidance behaviour. So, yeah, moving on. So it is predictable that there would be a community of practice forming. Sorry, a community of practice forming around PDA Profile of Autism, and this is what this quote is talking about. Is that this quote from Roy Grinker is saying that once a kind of a category has so many people kind of interacting around it, so many people kind of generating income and kind of products around it, this category just takes a life of its own, and people just start assuming it's a distinct, natural, real thing. Like it's an intrinsic kind of natural biological thing is what this quote is saying. So yeah, when you look at the PDA proof of autism kind of discourse, you'll start seeing certain terminology popping up. So you go back like 10, 15 years ago, like non PDA autism would be kind of described as being kind of like conventional autism or kind of classic autism, and this terminology is still used today. Within the kind of more recent PDA profile of autism kind of discourses. So yeah, it's kind of noted as being like conventional understandings of autism or kind of classic autism. There's kind of connotations attached to that, so it kind of suggests that kind of PDA profile autism is kind of atypical, unusual, unconventional, unorthodox, or unpopular. I'll just point out that if PDA profile autism is not conventional autism, it's probably just not autism, which is my view is just not autism. So, other terminology they're using for PDA profile autism is that it's kind of complex or perplexing. and that kind of non-PDA autism is kind of more straightforward presentations of autism. So there's kind of a false dichotomy being created around them. So what this terminology does is it excuses PDA's non-autism features and non-autism aspects, and it creates an environment which allows PDA to become autism-like over time. And I have a previous video which should be published in mid-October, kind of discussing how PDA descriptions have been changed to become autism-like. So, yeah, the PDA does well. I do think there is just a community of practice on around PDA profile of autism. I think that's blatantly clear when you kind of stop to consider it. Yeah, so this talk builds on points I made in previous videos around kind of PDA profile of autism, having community practice and certain assumptions around it, like assumptions that autism expanded to include it, and that PDA features equal autism features, etc., etc. So I'm not really going to be covering those in this video. I'm going to be covering other problematic aspects of this community of practice in this video, because the aspects I will be talking about allow the other stuff to happen, like allow the kind of PDA profile of autism, the PDA descriptors change to become autism-like, and it kind of allows kind of people to stop discussing why it's problematic viewing PDA as a form of autism. So yeah, a community of practice will tend to have its own ideology and terminology, and that PDA is kind of a severe autism subtype with its strategies that are different to kind of like conventional autism. But generally know that these claims lack any evidence of kind of sufficient quality to justify these claims. We also know generally that kind of PDA profile advocates are not engaging with divergent outlooks. They simply just aren't referencing them, and this is still often the case today. So yeah, there's a couple of assumptions that I do want to look at. So there's an assumption that PDA profile of autism advocates know better than other topic experts, and there's another one which is just efforts to avoid debating what PDA could be. So some examples. So this is a quote from Anais et al. 2016a, and what it talks about how since around 2010 there's a lot of interest around PDA as a form of autism, and that this interest can cause people to be on the lookout for it, so it creates a source of bias. So these authors basically say that this data was collected before that interest, so it allows them to kind of get an unbiased view on it. The problem I have with this is that this research assumes that PDA is a form of autism, and it assumes that these researchers know what PDA looks like. So they assume that their views on PDA are better than other people's, and I have massive problems with that assumption. So this quote is from a research report, or what I think is a research report by the PDA Society, which it claims to be clinical guidance. So it says that equally contributors have noted that with increased awareness there has been some over-identification by other practitioners. So that's from page 1. So what they're saying here is that PDA profile of autism attributions are not proper PDA. This is despite this claim being a no true Scotsman fallacy. And I'd point out that the no true Scotsman fallacy is also used to justify, is also applicable to arguments used to justify profound autism. And profound autism is another proposed autism subtype. So, yeah. For this quote, this is a quote that Phil Christie often uses in their conference talks, and it's basically saying that they need to maintain the integrity of how PDA profile autism is understood and the nature of its support. And I have problems with this because it just looks like they're attempting to just avoid debate what PDA could be and just engaging with divergent views on PDA. And it kind of goes back to that point of just it kind of goes hand in hand with assuming they know better than everyone else. So yeah. The second quote is from Anais et al. 2018. It's their response to the Green et al. Papers in the Lancet Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. And it kind of matters because in the original kind of review by Green et al. 2018a, they acknowledge that PDA is seen in non-autistic people. But this response basically it argues against this proposal to model PDA in clinical practice and research as its features belonging to various accepted categories or difficulties like ADHD, conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, anxiety, etc. So, I do have some sympathy with this argument from 9 to tell 2018, is that they're basically saying that if you're going to use general parenting strategies, which can often use reinforcement-based approaches, this could be problematic for the people that attribute with PDA if their demand avoidance is linked to anxiety, because it could potentially risk stripping away their support, their only kind of coping mechanism to kind of aversive demands. The problem I have with this quote is the final sentence, is which they're arguing for research into interventions that are most effective for problematic demand avoidance in autism spectrum disorder. So they're just kind of ignoring the entire aspect that some people are saying that PDA is seen in non-autistic people. Um, they're not advocating for research in non-autistic people with PDA. They're just going, we're just focusing on PDA in a form of autism, well, in autistic people. That is not, and it's problematic on multiple levels from my perspective, because there is no evidence to say that PDA is not clinically needed in non-autistic people. While we know that there is some clinical evidence suggests PDA is needed in non-autistic people, because there are some PDA diagnoses in non-autistic people. So this final quote is from Christie 2007 and is often kind of restated in other works involving Phil Christie, such as Christie et al. 2012 and Feather and Christie 2019. So this quote talks about how we shouldn't be debating what PDA could be. We should be focusing on the true purpose of attributing someone with a psychiatric category, and that's so it can form kind of support packages and to provide some sense of understanding. And it's just literally arguing against kind of debating what PDA is. So yeah. I'm moving on to the next kind of topic, which is kind of vulnerable groups. So when you kind of look at PDA clinical descriptions and kind of, there are often a lot of problematic behaviours, which is it's difficult for the person to want to express them to kind of deal with, but also for those people around them to help co-regulate. And I would argue that if you just stop to consider what it's like to be on the end of these kind of problematic behaviours, it is predictable that anyone who's consistently around them will be kind of anxious, because it's just so unreliable and so kind of often can be so extreme. So the below quote is literally of what I think are problematic behaviours listed within the 11 revised PDO disco items. So the disco is a semi-restricted interview created by the National Autistic Society to assess for autism, and it has 11 revised items that have been designed to assess for autism. To assess for PDA as a autism subgroup. And so these include kind of tantrums, scratches, bites, kicks, or passively resists, runs away, hides, removes clothes, uses doll or puppet to make excuse, if all else fails, screams, hits, kicks in a panic, tearing from another person's work, pulling off someone's spectacles, taking pants down and urinating on the floor, injuring someone else's pet animal, kind of lie, cheating or steal, kind of saying I hate you in a sweet voice while hugging, may hug others for too long, too hard. So that's kind of part of the rapid mood changes. Kind of frequently tease but he refused to take turns, making trouble, writing threatening letters, making verbal threats, stalking and true accusations of sexual abuse. So yeah, it actually turns out that there is some empirical evidence which suggests that PDA caregivers are vulnerable persons. So yeah, so Lauren Goods, PhD, she noted that parents of children with PDA and suspected PDA are identified as an at-risk group. The next quote is from Duravilla and Levi. I've not seen this paper, but what this quote says is that the anxiety levels of parents of children with PDA behaviour are higher than those of caregivers of autism and conduct disorder. So Yeah, the rest of the quote is actually quite interesting because it says like being calm and positive when you are being challenged by your child's daily avoidance demands or when dealing with a meltdown is indeed not an easy task. And I like this full quote because it actually I'm trying to be empathetic for the caregivers and for the those attribute with PDA. Um, I need to go back briefly. There's a reason why I say regular exposure is problematic because it doesn't matter if these features are being expressed one day a week or every day a week, they're going to be problematic and cause people problems, and they are going to affect the relationship between the caregiver and the person expressing the behaviours, or any adult and a child young person expressing these behaviours, because um, it's just really unpleasant and often difficult to deal with. If someone is being violent towards you um, consistently on a regular basis, that's going to be problematic. Or regardless if it's like one day a week or every day a week. So, um, just carrying on. So, we know that caregivers are highly motivated to take part in research because some PDA Profile of ASD advocates have said that. And more recently, there is kind of other evidence to suggest that. So, we know that interest in PDA in the UK has sharply risen over the last 10 years, and his interest way outstrips his research base. But kind of some couple of examples. So, in 2018, the PDA Society did a report, and they had about 1,500 responses in a 2 week period in March 2018. And more recently, 5 years ago, there was a petition to try and get like PDA to be, have extra training and stuff done on it, and there was just over 11,000 responses over like a 6 month period. So there's there is there just seems to be quite a substantial amount of interest, and obviously this interest has obviously grown over the last 5 years. Um, there's this quote from the petition which I think is quite important to kind of recognise because it shows some difficulties that um, caregivers and their those that attribute PDA are facing. So, a doctor diagnosed my son with PDA. I had a judge order my son to be seen by CAMS to support the psychologist's diagnosis, but they did not commission PDA, so we're stuck in a limbo. To the point that social services wanted to put my son in foster care, but luckily it was a judge who saw there was a problem, and now, and now we're back at the beginning. So yeah, moving on from that, we know that when the National Autism Society was having its annual PDA conferences from 2011 to 2019, these conferences were oversubscribed. I think more recently the conferences have been taken over or they've stopped, and since then the PDA space has kind of filled the gap of having like an annual PDA conference. Um, but the NAS conference fees were at the time between like 90 to £474. So this is getting quite sized amount of money for a lot of people. Um, and this quote from Moore 2020 notes that there are a growing number of private providers who have emerged, basically giving a diagnosis of PDA, a PDA profile of autism, but they cost again quite significant. So it's anything between like £1,000 to 3,500. Um, and more recently, like if you go back to this report by the PDA Society, which is basically represents the views of 12 clinicians, which the PDA Society has invited and asked their views on, like how should one assess an attribute PDA. 11 of those 12 contributors are involved in private practice, um, and we got a more recent kind of clinical audit from one private clinic of its case notes from like 2015 2017, and over this 2 year time period, they looked at 351 assessments, and out of those, 111 were given attributions of autism PDA. But that's going to be a lower figure because they should have been assessing for PDA more than that, and they should be having some false. They should be making some false. They should not be diagnosing PDA who they don't meet their kind of threshold for it. So, and also Phil Christie, who's meant to be the leading expert on PDA, he's worked on an independent basis on PDA for like since like around 2014ish. So yeah, um, the reason I'm saying this is because it's unlikely we'll be seeing this amount of clinicians offering private diagnosis of PDA and over such a long time period and in such volume if they weren't benefiting from it. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying they definitely are, but it just seems to be the case. So this image represents it's a screenshot of a notes of corrections for Anions and EAT in 2021, and it just shows some undisclosed conflicts of interest which seem to be financially related. I'll put a link in the description to where you can find this image. But yeah, um, this image is of 6 people expressing concerns over Harry Thompson, also known as PDA extraordinaire. Um, I'm not going to go into detail these allegations and concerns around it, but basically, these people, he's basically been blacklisted by the PDA community, but that's lived experience kind of PDA community, for concerns around um, just basically being a predator and taking advantage of people. Um, I don't know if these allegations are true or not. The reason why I'm mentioning this is that it seems to be that it's likely that the main reason for Harry Thompson interacting with their alleged victims is due to the hype around PDA as a profile of autism. So the point I'm making here is that if this hype around PDA wasn't a thing because people are actually acting ethically and making claims, reports to evidence, and actively kind of portraying people's views in it, it's unlikely that Harry Thompson would have been interacting with so many people. So I'm so yeah. It's also important because like one can predict in a situation where something's being kind of like prematurely pushed on little to no evidence of note to many vulnerable persons, it's a recipe for predators taking advantage of people. So yeah, this image I'm not going to go into, and I should give a trigger warning because it talks about filicide of an autistic child in Ireland, and it's from a reporting on a court case in 2019. Um, I'll put a link in the description so you can go away and read it, but I'm really uncomfortable with it for multiple reasons. One, because the child died, but also because of the discourse it says around PDA, because it says it's like a severe thing and he's meant to have his own strategies, and the caregiver was distressed around the prospect of the child not being adequately supported and um, everything else. The caregiver was so distressed at this, they they killed their child. And the more reason for this is if that one considers the ideology and terminology around PDA, it is portrayed as being this severe, debilitating thing, version of autism, i.e., severe autism, with his own set of strategies that are different from rest of autism, and it's it's obviously targeted at vulnerable people. Well, I think it's targeted at vulnerable people. Um, the with the fact that we know that filicide autistic children and persons happen, and often happen for the kind of reasons kind of set out earlier, that it's entirely predictable that these kind of cases would happen if one stops to think about it. And what really bothers me about it is that this caregiver was given this information on PDA as a profile of autism when there's little to no evidence to kind of back it up, the claims around it, and that the expertise and the claims of the PDA profile of autism experts is highly contested. Um, so yeah, I mean, I would question where did he get this information on PDA from, who gave it to them, and I would suggest that if the information sources that his caregiver was finding on PDA, if they were acting ethically, as in presenting balanced overviews on PDA and making claims proportionate to the evidence base, I would say it's probably likely that this child would still be alive. So, yeah, I'm deeply uncomfortable with the material in this video. For obvious reasons, it's upsetting to kind of talk about the topics, but it's also, I don't like talking about these aspects of PDA. I'd much rather say everything's wonderful and it's the best thing since the wheel was invented. Um, but I do need to point out that it is a choice to propagate and create, create a community of practice around PDA profile of autism. And my previous videos should show that it's a choice to view PDA as a profile of autism. Um, and PDA profile of autism does seem to be at least aimed at vulnerable persons, and apparently with predictable negative consequences. So I've got two slides on kind of reflective questions. So does PDA Profile of Autism raise standards in autism theory, research, or practice, and why? And how many autistic deaths do we need due to adverse effects of proposed subtypes before we stop advocating for autism subtypes, and why? And who has researched or written about PDA as a profile of autism, and why? And who stands to benefit from creating or propagating a PDA profile of autism community of practice, and why? So these are my contact details, so like my email address, Twitter handle, ResearchGate link with my some research on, and you'll be watching this on your channel, on my YouTube channel anyway. So there's 8 reference slides. I'm not going to linger on too long because the slides are in the link where you can pause the video to access them if you want. And yeah, so this is the second one and the third one. I've actually done most of my typical talk, which is kind of like reflect on the video already. Yeah, this video should be published around early November. And yeah, I'm kind of grateful that this video is kind of done because it's like over halfway through the videos I need to kind of make on the list. Um, so yeah, this is the second to last one. So and this is the last slide. So thank you for your time, and I hope you found it useful. I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.